Formula 1 is back after 3 grueling weekends of nothingness. Well, okay, it's not quite that bad, but finally, Formula 1 is back and we're fishing in Baku. That's a reference that only Battlefield players will get. But we've got 5 races coming up in 6 weeks. We've got a double header with Baku and Miami, and then a triple header with Monaco, Spain, and Imola. But what can we expect from Baku? This is only the 6th time we've been to Baku, with the first race being in 2017 and won by Daniel Ricciardo. The circuit is just over 6 kilometers long and the race is held over 51 laps, with the circuit having 20 corners. The Baku street circuit is one of the fastest street circuits on the calendar, with an average speed of over 350 kilometers an hour, thanks to its very long straights. This weekend, the tyres being brought to Baku are the C5, C4 and C3. Currently, no driver has won the Baku Grand Prix twice, with Ricciardo, Hamilton, Bottas, Perez and then Max Verstappen winning last year. Are we going to get a different winner this time around? The Baku Grand Prix has had its fair share of interesting moments over the years, but it's probably 2021 that will be the standout moment for most people, when Max Verstappen had his huge tyre blower on the main straight. He was incredibly lucky that he came away from it without any serious injuries. Then, after the restart, it was Lewis Hamilton that made an error into turn 1, having left on his brake magic, something on the Mercedes car that sends all the brake bias to the front so they can heat up the tyres and the brakes. He left it on accidentally and he locked up and went straight on at the first corner and ruined his chances of getting points. We should probably mention Lance Stroll as well, getting a podium at Baku in 2017 for Williams. We all know the struggles Williams have had over the years, so it was a great result. And with Aston Martin in their current form, maybe he can replicate it again. And we obviously can't forget Romain Grosjean putting it in the wall under the safety car in 2018, claiming that Ericsson had hit him. We all know that no one hit him, but he just lost it himself under the safety car. I don't normally do this, but I thought it would be interesting to see a full onboard of the Baku track. And well, I can't share an entire F1 onboard without getting copyright notices up to my eyeballs, so here's an onboard from F1 22 for your delight. You'd think that because there was a 3-week gap between races, there is a good chance teams are going to be bringing a lot of upgrades to Baku. And well, you'd be somewhat right and somewhat wrong. Teams are going to bring small upgrades for sure, but there are a few reasons teams might want to hold back on some big upgrades. First of all, it's a street circuit, and they aren't the best to bring upgrades on, somewhat due to the inconsistent and bumpy surface, but mainly due to the risk of damaging new parts. This weekend has the added negative of having the first sprint race of the season, meaning teams have very little time to get their cars set up, let alone test new parts. Speaking of sprint, the F1 organisers have decided to change the format ahead of this sprint race weekend. I have done a whole video covering this, so I'm not really going to talk about it too much. I will leave the link below. But essentially, FP2 on Saturday is now a second qualifying, and there's 2 qualifyings over the course of the weekend, one for the main race and one for the sprint race. And the sprint no longer decides the grid for Sunday. It's all very complicated, it's all very unnecessary, but I do have a link below if you want to know more details about that. There's one other thing that F1 have changed in the middle of the season, and that's the team's allowances for engine parts. What the FA have done is increase the allowance for teams. So the yearly allocation for the ICE, so that's the internal combustion engine, turbochargers, MGU-H and MGU-K have increased now from 3 to 4. I think the change was probably needed, especially with the addition of sprint races. It's kind of weird for it to happen 3 races into the season, but it makes sense. With all that said, what's going on with the teams? Well, let's start with Mercedes. James Allison has said that Mercedes are going to be bringing updates at most of the upcoming races, and that Baku is no exception. Don't expect big side pod changes or anything like that though. Any changes will likely be less visible. We shouldn't really expect a big upgrade package from Mercedes until Imola time. There were rumours a little while ago that Mercedes would be bringing new heave springs, heave dampers and corner dampers, which would make sense as suspension and the ride seems to be one of the biggest issues with the car, especially grip on the rear axle. We've seen some pit lane pictures thanks to Albert Fabrega, and Mercedes seem to have a medium downforce wing on. I am a little bit concerned though that the rear wing Mercedes have elected to bring could mean they might struggle down the straights, and especially in the multiple DRS zones. The one down the main straight has actually been shortened by 100 meters. They could find themselves behind other cars such as Alpine, who are extremely fast in a straight line. Speaking of fast in a straight line, can anyone beat Red Bull this weekend? I think that if Red Bull have a clean weekend, and there's no guarantee that they will because of the format, they will win pretty comfortably. especially with how efficient their car is in a straight line, and we know Baku is predominantly straights. I mentioned that Red Bull seemed to have opted for a medium wing, based on the early pit images. Red Bull can get away with that though, because during qualifying the main straights will have long DRS zones, and we know that Red Bull is really efficient with its DRS. They will then be able to use that extra downforce from that medium wing in the middle sectors. Ferrari, on the other hand, will be hoping to bounce back from a few rough weekends, and supposedly they've been doing a lot of simulator work, testing lots of configurations of suspension, rear wings, engine modes to try and get on top of their issues. Only time will tell if it's actually paid off, but their engineers seem to be happy. Could we really see Ferrari fighting at the front again? It's not all good news for Ferrari though, as people seem to be jumping ship, with Lauren Meckies confirmed now to be leaving the team to take over at AlphaTauri. Not great signs coming out of Ferrari. Last of all, what about Aston Martin and McLaren? Well, Aston Martin have of course had an incredible start to the season, and we all know what Fernando Alonso is capable of. But Aston Martin know their car isn't particularly efficient in a straight line. They do have a new rear wing though that will hopefully give them better speed down the straight. And McLaren, well, they promised a B-spec version of their car for around the Baku race. In fact, it was billed as the car they should have started the season with. Well, from what we've seen so far, we know that they've got a low downforce rear wing, which is expected for the Baku circuit, but thanks to images from Albert Fabrega again, we can see they've brought a brand new floor, which to the naked eye might not seem that different, but it does seem as though there are changes to the floor tunnel as well. And often with these new cars, it's actually what you can't see that offers up the most downforce. It'll be very interesting to see how that McLaren runs this weekend. Lots of interesting things could happen this weekend, and I'm just glad Formula 1 is back, and it's back for the next 6 weeks. I can't wait. I hope you enjoyed this preview to the Baku Grand Prix. If you did, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.